kitchen. Don't worry, I'm not going to cook anything. I am going to raid those cabinets for some basing materials. I've done a video on this before, but I don't think I explained things very well. So I'm going to give it another go and this time show you the materials I've used, kind of what they look like before I add them to a project. I'm certainly not the first person to come to the kitchen looking for miniature materials, but I will go through what I typically do and try and share with you some things that I've done wrong that will hopefully save you the hassle on whatever you're building. So the first thing I want to talk about is like a dirt ground cover. Something like this guy. Typically for something like that, I would mix together coffee grounds, used coffee grounds, or used tea grounds. It's something we usually have a lot of here. So let's go through kind of that process first, and then I'll explain like more of a green, lush base covering. So to get started, my husband has a fancy schmancy AeroPress coffee maker thing. And it gives me these cute little coffee pucks. I usually set one of these out to dry for like a couple of days, maybe a week, just to make sure all the moisture is evaporated out of it, and then I just go ahead and crumble it. It doesn't really matter how you get your coffee grounds, if you have to dump them out of a filter from a slow drip or cut open the individual brew pots. However you can get your hands on coffee grounds will work fine. The only thing you really want to make sure of is that you let them dry out completely. Not a bad idea to even give it an extra day or two from when you think it's really dry. I've already put some coffee grounds away for storage in a sealed container when I thought they were dry, and they weren't, and they started growing mold. So just give it some time, don't rush it, and hopefully you won't have any mold in your house. So with coffee, I really like the color of it, especially for a very rich earth or maybe wet areas like a swamp or something. The thing about coffee is no matter what kind you get, it all kind of ends up the same color. So that's when I started looking into my tea grounds. I typically drink black tea. And black tea, see if I can do this without screwing up my tripod. Oops, wrong way. Looks pretty cool, just straight out of the bag. But there's not much difference between that and what coffee looks like. But after I make a cup of tea and I let it dry out, it lightens up and it gets more of a orangish, reddish brown, which gives me more contrast between the coffee grounds. So that's what I typically use. This guy right here was based using just a mixture of coffee grounds and some black tea that was already brewed, and that's it. It's just coffee and black tea. And that's pretty cool on its own. There are definitely more teas out there than I could ever imagine. And each of them are probably going to give you something totally different. Just your basic green tea is as advertised green. This works really well for like dead grass patches, maybe leaf litter. which, unlike black tea, does not really change color after you've brewed it. The cool thing about using coffee and tea is you can find it pretty cheap. I got this whole box of green tea bags at the dollar store. So if you have no intention of drinking this crap, that's definitely not a bad price for something if you have to cover like a large display board or something. Check out the dollar store. They'll be selling, you know, coffee, tea, other spices, which we'll go over in a bit. I also have, where'd I put it? Before I started building terrain, I bought some peppermint tea, mostly because I like the box. But I did find out that I do not like peppermint tea. It even told me there was catnip in it. So I tried seeing if our kitty would be interested, and she was not. So I saved it, and now I use it for ground cover. This is pretty cool. This is kind of how it came out of the package. I didn't mix anything else in there, and it already has a kind of cool variety of textures and colors. This would be really good for like a barren landscape, or let's say maybe a horse stable. So I also have this stuff, which is pretty cool, especially if you're doing like dead shrubbery or tree roots. This actually was a tea that my mother-in-law gave me, a fancy schmancy tea shop, and actually when it started out of the container, all these little strands were compressed into balls like this, except a little bit bigger. But after you brewed it and it soaked into the hot water, all those little strands expanded and broke out of their little ball form to give me this cool stringy stuff. So next time you're at the grocery store, start looking around the coffee aisle, see what you can find to give you some ideas. So what I'm going to do is actually just take everything I have out here and dump it into one container. You could keep everything you have separated and not cross-contaminate your supplies. I personally prefer to mix things up before I add them to a base. Oops. I think it looks a little bit more natural that way. In some of that peppermint tea for some lighter flecks, and then just mix it up. I know when I first started making terrain, and I've seen a lot of other beginners do this too, they would, almost lost you. Everybody would put like a patch of dark base covering and a patch of light and then a patch of dark, and this was kind of our way to randomize the ground. But the problem with that is you get a very stark line between one material and the other, and that doesn't happen in nature. So when we mix things up ahead of time, you're going to get a different mixture every time you pour onto your base. There's different materials in here, they're going to settle differently. So we're not using one color at a time, it's sort of blending together to give us a more natural kind of feel appeal to our ground. So coffee and tea aren't the only things from the kitchen that work well in miniature building. You should also check out your spice rack. Probably the most common I've seen, and the first one I ever used, was dried parsley. It makes really nice leaf litter, or I've put it on the side of buildings as climbing ivy. And you can buy little model ivy leaves from, certain distributors, but it could get kind of pricey, and parsley looks pretty good for the price that you pay for it. So that's what I stick with. And then I started thinking about other spices after seeing this artist online. His name is Matthew Albanese, and he does some ridiculous landscape art using everyday materials. Like, specifically, there was the Mars surface. And he said he used like 12 pounds of paprika and chili powder and nutmeg and cinnamon, and it just looked really cool. And it got me to thinking that some of these products that are marketed for model builders aren't always the best for the smaller scales. Like, it's hard to find sand that isn't a 1-to-1 scale sand, like for us to stand on. If you use sand for 28 millimeter or 15 millimeter, it's one grain is half the size of a guy's foot. So finely ground spices might be, a better alternative for that, to look a little more realistic when you have a little dude standing on it. So I had like this old western town, like 6 buildings that I needed to base. And I wanted that real old, dusty feel that these people had to put up with back then. So I started gathering my spices, and I had like onion powder and garlic powder, nutmeg, cinnamon, all these real lighter brown, really fine spices. And it looked okay. The only problem was I did not think about how potently each of those ingredients smells and how badly the super smell was when they all get mixed together. It was bad, and I did all 6 buildings at once, so it was coming from all angles. I mean, it was sitting in my living room for a couple of days, and the smell would not go away, and I was getting scared because I didn't want to risk damaging the buildings by taking them off. So I let them sit outside on our, balcony patio thing for, like a week, probably more than a week, just to let it air out, and that ended up working. I mean, I could present it to my customer that way without handing them over a smoke bomb, So, spices are cool. Just think about all of their qualities instead of just the color and texture like I did. And definitely go check out that Matthew Albanese. I'll put his website here for you. It's just amazing what that guy can do with candle wax and jelly beans. I mean, even if you have no ambition to ever make terrain, it's beautiful artwork that you should probably just see so you can say that you saw it. Okay, so much like the dirt process, if I was going to make something a little more lush or like a grass covered base, I'm going to use the same principle of, dumping a bunch of shit in the bin and then adding it to my board, except less of it is food products. You could add some of that parsley like I talked about earlier. I'm going to throw in a couple of those green tea bags that I showed you. But I think the rest of it is, store-bought products. I have some fine turf from Woodland Scenics. And if you're not familiar with this, they're very small particles. Super tiny. And this happens to be their blended color. So there's some dark greens in there, some light greens, and you know, little bits of yellow. So we'll put some more of that in. I have some other fine turf that is just a different color. It's more like a burnt earth. Put some of that in there. What else do I have? I have some static grass. It's that same burnt color. If you're not familiar with static grass, they are little fibers or little hairs that if you lay glue down on your base and you just put this on, it's kind of just gonna lay like you see on this plate, kind of flat like a bad toupee. They do make static grass applicators, which are pretty cool. Kind of uses electricity to use the little fibers and make them stand up like real grass would. It's pretty cool. So we'll put some of that in there. I have some static grass. It's a different color from Citadel. This is one of those pre-blended things as well. It has some lighter greens and yellows and browns in it. So I'm just gonna dump some of that in there. I have coarse turf, which is similar to the fine turf except in bigger chunks. So there are some small ones, but it does have, oh you stupid light, some clumping tendencies. So if you don't want those, you can just break them apart with your finger. So I have that in a light green, and I have some somewhere in dark green as well. So I'll add some of that. I'll cut open some of these tea bags. I think I'm also going to throw in some of that dirt we just made. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh, this stuff. Oh, this stuff. I bought this from Silphor. It's supposed to be like IV. And don't get me wrong, I like Silphor. They have like more reasonably priced grass tufts and stuff than like Games Workshop would have. But this product in particular I was not very fond of. It comes in these sheets of like webbed fibers, and you're supposed to be able to pull them apart and adjust them the way you want to look like ivy climbing up the side of your building. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but those leaves come off really bad, and doesn't come apart very well. When it does, I don't think it looks very good. So maybe somebody can make them look good, but I can't make them look good. So what I usually do is take chunks of it, scrape the leaves off, and add them to stuff like this. So now we have all these cute little leaves we can add to our ground mixture. think that's all I have. So, let's see everything we have in there. I'm just gonna mix it up. So now we have almost like a confetti of green stuff and some brown stuff. And kind of like the coffee mixture, each of these little components are going to settle differently. Like the finer ground turf, you'll probably see cling to your glue a lot quicker and easier than the large chunks of coarse turf. So as you're going and covering your bases, if you need to add more of one thing or another, go right ahead. The only thing is, if you have to cover like a whole army or a large display board or something, make sure you mix enough of it initially, because you probably won't be able to mix the, same ratio again. And when I cover bases and things, I don't always mix things first. Sometimes I do just use like this blended turf straight out of the container. When I do that, I usually keep something like this around, just a general dump bin, so that when I add things to a base and I shake off the excess and maybe it's contaminated with static grass that I had in a different area, I can just dump it in something like this and it blends in to the little medley we have going on. It doesn't really cause any harm, and I'm not just throwing away crap I had to pay $10.50 for. Okay, I think that's it. I think I covered everything this time. Not too bad, right? If I can do it, you can do it. If not, and you have questions, like I said, let me know. I will see what I can do to kind of clear things up. If you don't know where to find me to ask those questions, I'm on Facebook, Google+, Twitter, Blogspot. I have a good old-fashioned email, whatever you're comfortable using. I'm online a lot of the time, so I should get back to you pretty quick. Other than that, third video done in less than 3 months. Pretty proud of myself. Might actually get used to this whole recording and talking to myself in my kitchen thing. Probably not, but I am trying. So I hope you like it. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time.